I am just getting ready to hop on my radio show, so now doesn't work. Anytime after 1 o'clock today. I work out of my home, and yes. Thank you. Hi, Shawn. Can you hear me? I'm not hearing you.
Now, can you hear me?
I can. Hang on, I've got somebody at the door. I'll be right back.
Okay.
I'm going to open the garage door. For a very fast move outside right now. I just want to know if he gets outside. You can't really stop him. I'm going to open the garage door. You can just go in and out. Don't ring the doorbell or anything. Just come in and out. Yeah, because this door automatically locks like after about a second. So. Sorry about that, Shawn. I am going to move into a different room because he is going to be going in and out. And
You're fine.
Yeah, Terminex was coming to do an inspection, and they were supposed to be here at 10, which would have been fine. They said 10 to noon, and if they had said noon, I would have said that would not be fine. Shawn, where do you live?
I get it. I live in Cincinnati. Huh. Where are you at?
I'm in Tampa, Florida.
So are you in Tampa or?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
There we go.
One of my favorite places to stay is at Sand Key.
Ah.
Not too far. So we lived in Florida for almost 10 years. I worked for that guy back there, that big mouse.
Ah.
Yeah. So no, Florida. We literally lived, when I say coast to coast, we lived coast to coast. We started in Palm Coast, Daytona area, then moved all the way to the other coast to Bradenton, Lakewood Ranch, then moved to the center, moved to Orlando, and then moved to Fort Myers, Naples.
Oh, wow. And what took you back to Cincinnati?
Well, then when we left there, we actually moved to Dallas, Texas, and this was all work related. And then Dallas moved to Cincinnati, and we've been here now 6 years, and we don't plan on going anywhere else.
Well, we moved here 21 years ago, and I absolutely don't intend to be anywhere else, but we lived in Dallas. I lived in Dallas for 10 years. I met my husband there.
Where, what part of Tampa are you in?
We are out near USF.
Okay.
It's officially Carrollwood.
Yeah.
But we absolutely love it here.
Yep. Yeah, we're probably going to buy a condo someplace on that coast soon. Because we like to come, and like this summer we're spending 6 weeks in Bonita Springs.
Oh, yeah.
We're just going to close the house up here and come down there with the dogs and kids. We all love the beach. But I don't have any, I grew up in Arizona, and I don't have any desire to live in the heat again during the summertime. Not that the humidity with heat's not much better here, so at least we figure if we get a place and we spend the summer down there, that's why we want it on the water, so we can use the water.
Definitely.
So, yeah. Well, I'm really excited to do the podcast with you. Sorry, we've had to reschedule it twice.
Oh, don't worry. No, I'm very flexible. This is not a line of business for me. I'm a tech CEO, so I really just do it for fun, for me, and for helping authors get the word out, because I know how challenging that can be. I'm sitting in front of my book, but my book came out a couple of years ago, and I've been doing this show for about 12 years.
Okay.
Before podcasting was a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you said you're a tech CEO. So what space do you play in?
The travel industry.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been in travel tech my whole life, my whole adult life. I started out working with accounting system companies, and that company got bought by American Airlines Sabre. And so I was with Sabre for 10 years in Dallas, and then moved to Atlanta with WorldSpan, which was owned by Delta Northwest and TWA. And then I've been out on my own since 1996. So my firm built LasVegas.com. We built the first mobile portal for Intel. So I do a lot of, I used to do a lot of big projects for other companies, and I worked on a lot of merger and acquisition activity with big companies who wanted to be in travel. They weren't necessarily travel companies. A lot of times I was working for the investment community. So, but I've been out on my own as a tech CEO for over 10 years, and I'm on my second tech startup. It's not for the faint of heart. It's hard, and especially in travel right now with COVID. So,
yeah. So do you listen to podcasts a lot?
I do not.
Well, I will send you a link, and I'm looking for the episode, because I think you would like our episode that we did with Terry. I just lost his last name. Oh my gosh, I feel awful. Terry Jones.
Oh yeah, no, I worked for Terry Jones 35 years ago. I have known him for actually 4 years ago.
We did. He was awesome. On the podcast. So
yeah, no, he is.
Yeah. And we're actually looking at doing some work for him right now. Around the innovation space. So
yep. Now I started working at the same company he was with in 1982. So
wow.
We've known each other for a very, very long time.
Wow. Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. Small world.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me tell you how I do my interview. It's perhaps slightly different than any other interview you've been on. I don't pre-write any questions. I simply look at your table of contents of the book, and we have a conversational interview around that, because I figure there's nothing that you talk about in your book that you can't talk about, right? And so I just use it to prompt questions. No one who listens to my show ever knows that that's how I do my interviews, but it makes it sound like I've read your book, which I usually read the book after the interview. If the interview goes really well and I'm engaged and want to say, tell me more, right?
Yeah. No, so, I love it.
Yeah, so it'll be about 30 minutes. And again, I've been doing it that way for, since 2008, when I started my show. So it just flows really naturally. I want it to be fun for you. My whole goal is to have this show be what your audience needs it to be. My audience, I distribute through all the usual suspects. I'm on C-Suite Radio Network, which they proclaim that they're the largest business podcast, around. I haven't been able to validate that, but then I'm with the other channels. But I have a small group that I distribute the show to, and that is the only place where the video will be. Everything else audio only. And if I didn't already invite you to that community, it is a community called the Game Changer. So I only invite game changers there, and it's a really cool group of people. I do have a lot of authors and a lot of folks who've got their own consulting group. So sometimes there's a good match with you and someone else that's there. It really is like just having a cool room to invite people over to out of the big room, right?
I love it.
All right.
Yeah, and you will see I talk a lot through the book, and I have no problem showing people, like, even I take Post-its in my own book. So
cool. Well, that's how I read too, with a pen and marking things in the margins.
Yeah.
So okay, well, let's get started then.
Awesome.
Good afternoon. This is Chickie Fitzgerald, and we are here with the author of a book called Kiss Your Dragons. And what a great title. And, I love the whole concept behind this book. It is about radical relationships, bold heart sets, and changing the world. And that could not be more aligned with the way that I run my business and kind of my personal mantra. So let's welcome Shawn Nason. Shawn, why don't you tell us a little bit about your backstory? We don't necessarily want to know the bio, but really what brought you to the place where you wrote this amazing book?
Well, first off, Chickie, thank you for allowing me to be on this. It's an honor, and to share my story. It's a little different, and I sum it up into I think I'm in my fourth or fifth career. So my first career, I was a professional musician. So I'm a trained jazz pianist and vocalist. And when that time was done, and that work led me into some of the Christian music world and into the church world. My second career was pastor. So my wife and I were pastors for and then the next career left us. We lived in Orlando, Florida, not far from where you are, Chickie. And for those of you that are watching the video, you'll see this big picture of a mouse behind me. And for those of you that are listening, my third career went into working for the Walt Disney Company. And it was an honor to work for that company for almost 7 years. And during that time, I was very, very fortunate to become a Walt Disney Imagineer. And that is the creative space for Disney, and learned so much about Disney. Worked in the cruise line, worked in the real estate space there. But what's interesting is in that career, I actually became a finance person. So I have my original bachelor's and all in music, and then I have a bachelor's in finance and a master's in finance.
Wow.
And so
background.
Yeah, right. So here I am, I become this finance person, but I'm in an organization like Disney, in a Walt Disney Imagineer, where I got to learn so many concepts around innovation and so many concepts around guest experience, right? And was exposed to so many things in my world, which led to my next career move, which I was recruited into healthcare, out of all places, and went to work for one of the big major 4 insurers in our country, and helped stand up their strategic member experience and strategic innovation work. which led me into the next career change, which was higher ed. And that's a whole nother conversation we could have over wine, preferably.
Yes,
Uh,
I've got a few of those.
and I learned more in that 16 months than I had in my whole career. Most importantly, I learned how to fail. And really, that's where, not knowing it, where Kiss Your Dragons started to happen in my life. And then in 2015, the end of 2015, started my own company, which is Mofi. And that's when Man on Fire was born. And over the past 5 years is when this whole concept of Kiss Your Dragons has come to life.
Well, very cool. I love
So,
how you describe this as a journey, that the book itself is actually a journey. Help us understand that as the foundation for delivering the information that you're talking about in the book.
yeah. So what's powerful is I am the main author, but I have two other co-authors, Michael Harper and Robin Glasco, who, if you looked at a spectrum of people in innovation and experience and in business, I am on one end, the complete risk doesn't scare me, nothing. On the other end is Michael, who ran from risk, like nothing risky. And then in the middle, we have Robin, who is a chief innovation officer in healthcare, who kind of balances in. And so the journey of this is really, and I actually talk about it in the book where I say it's an old Native American legend, Sioux legend. I'm a Native American, where it says the longest journey in life is from your head to your heart.
Mm.
And I've heard people say, well, is it really that, Shawn? And what we really get at on this journey and what we're talking about is it's a life journey. And you mentioned it, Chicky, around the radical relationships, bold heart sets, and changing the world. And that journey is not always a fun journey. It's not always an easy journey. To go from your head to your heart. You know this. You're in the startup space. You've been CEO several times. Like, it's not an easy journey always, but it's really fulfilling. And we talk about in the book, mindsets can change. You can, as you, I would imagine you're a lifelong learner, like I am. You learn, and your mindsets will change. What I have come to this conclusion in my years as a pastor, and I actually consider myself a pastor to the marketplace now. I don't pastor in four walls
Right.
at a church, but I pastor in the marketplace, right? Is our heart and our heart sets are innately who we are as people. And it's learning to lean in and kiss those things and
Right.
to be comfortable in those things.
So where did the whole framework around talking about dragons come from? Did you have a passion for dragons as a child, or is it something
No.
later?
So it's really interesting, Chicky. And I'll be completely transparent with the audience. I wrote this book using a team. And during the pandemic, I flew to Florida, to Fort Myers, Naples. And the team blocked out 6 hours a day for 4 days. And they said, we want you to do what you are most comfortable with. And we're just going to interview and we're just going to talk. And so my comfortable place during the summertime, during the pandemic, was in a pool for 6 hours a day. I was very tan when that when that journey ended.
Yeah.
But through our conversations, someone mentioned a concept about, well, so what are you saying, Shawn, is that we need to slay our dragons? And I stopped and I said, no, actually what we need to do is kiss our dragons. And then it came back to a movie. And if you've ever seen, there's a 3-movie series called How to Train Your Dragon. And Hiccup is the young boy and Toothless is the dragon. And when you start in that journey of those movies, much like what we're talking about here on Heart Sets, dragons were something people feared. That
Right.
culture feared dragons. And they actually slayed him. They killed him, right? Hiccup couldn't do it. Hiccup found Toothless, and he leaned in and he built this relationship, and he trained what I would say a radical relationship, right? With a radical relationship, everything you've been taught your whole life, you're going completely against. Leans in, trains this dragon. And as you go to the end of the third movie, that whole society had changed and started using dragons as a piece of their society to do work, and they were friends with these dragons. And the whole Viking society in the movie were riding dragons. They no longer slayed them, right? So let's put that in today's time. We live in a really separated, segregated, lots of times. We can't, no one gets along. I won't say no one, but we have very big divides, right?
Mhm.
And much of those big divides, and particularly in leadership and organizations, is because leaders are scared to lean into things that they fear the most. And I talk in the book about my 3-point sermon, and we joke about it a lot, because Michael, who wrote the book, he's like, you only have one sermon, Shawn, and it's the sermon you preach everywhere you go. All the work we do as consultants, when you work with C-suites, when you work with COs, and it's a simple 3-point sermon, is as a leader, you've got to be transparent. So you have to tell your organization when things are good, when things are bad, when things are in shift. And we do a ton of work in strategy and growth and turnarounds.
Right.
And as you know, Chicky, that can be a very tumultuous time, right, for organizations. But if you go in and you're transparent, it doesn't make it easier, but at least they see you as a person. And so many times as leaders, you're not even seeing you as a person.
Right.
The second thing I say to people is you have to build relationships. So when I worked in a building and when I go into organizations, I walk the floor. I say hi. I know people. I get to know them. If you're a CEO of an organization, if you're in a C-suite, if you're a team leader, you need to build relationships. So be transparent, build relationships. And the third one, I actually think is the hardest thing. As a leader, you have to love people.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like people, I just don't see how you can be a leader.
Right.
Right? You may be able to be a manager, or you may be able to, but you have to love people in some capacity. Doesn't mean the business doesn't have to be done. Doesn't mean results. It's hard. When we work in the turnaround space, it's hard because many times the work that we do affects people's lives. You may have to lay people off. You may have to let people go to get the business turned around.
Right.
But if they know you're doing it in love because you've built a relationship and you've been transparent with them, it sometimes makes it just a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
well, and that in and of itself is a radical thought, right? So in the book, when you talk about getting radical, this isn't the concept of being radical to where you're being objectionable, right, for the sake of taking a contrary position. It's actually doing things that people don't expect because they are difficult, right? Which really leads into this whole issue of falling in love with the problem and kissing the dragon, right? Because you have to be able to embrace that which is the most difficult for you. And I can tell you in my own business, Shawn, I have been, I've sat at the feet of the technology masters. I mean, we were talking before we started about Terry Jones, and actually I was just looking on the wall. You can only see a portion of the picture, but this picture was actually taken by Terry's brother, and who was a photographer for National Geographic. And you really ought to look into what he does, because what he does is he
does storytelling out of the photos that he takes. And this particular photo, he had every day been going to this field, and he had seen this gorgeous field of dandelions. And it was so beautiful, but like each day the lighting wasn't quite right? And then the day he finally shows up to take the picture where the lighting is beautiful, you can tell as he's driving there, he gets there and the field is full of puffballs, right? Which you're only seeing a half of the puffball. So he finds the beauty in the puffball, right?
Yeah.
He leans into his dragon because he's like, oh crap, here I had been waiting, for this gorgeous picture, all of these yellow flowers, and now I've got a field of puffballs.
The puffball.
Yep. But falling in love with that problem, right, and making the best of a situation really is what this is about, and perhaps even pushing past that, because the radical piece of this is actually really embracing what you really wanted to run from. And in my business, it's sales. I really loathe sales, but without sales, a tech company can't do anything.
Yeah.
Right.
So, and we talked about, with that, and I think I love that you brought that up, right, Chicky? Like, I don't like sales either. And in my company, in Mophie, I realized, okay, if I don't like it, then I need to surround myself with someone who does like it.
Absolutely.
Right? And let them go build the initial relationship so I can then go build the radical relationship.
Yes.
And my mentor, a wonderful gentleman, his name's Shawn Nason. He's a innovator, disruptor in the healthcare industry. He's the man behind what is now known as Walmart Health, and what Walmart's doing in the health space. He once said to me, he said, Shawn, the best thing I ever did in my life is I learned that I needed to surround myself with people smart. So I don't like sales. That's a problem because we don't have a business. You said it, right? So I surrounded myself with someone who likes sales, right? I'm not an executor. I'm an ideator. I needed to make sure I surrounded myself with someone, and you read it in the book, Michael Harper is our executor. So falling in love with the problem, and we talk about making sure you're falling in love with the problem and not the solution. And so many times as leaders and as corporations, C-suites fall in love with the initial solution and don't ever get to the real problem. And then that's why we come in and have to do turnaround work, or we work in the experience space. And the build it and they will come mentality doesn't work in an experience in a consumer driven economy anymore. People need to understand customers and what customers want. So very much fall in love with the problem.
Got it. But you talk about finding your dragon swarm, which is surrounding yourself with those people who are smarter, and then instilling this bias toward action. And I love the metaphor of unleashing your inner fire, because again, with the dragon, obviously the dragon is fire breathing, right? You wouldn't be a dragon worth your salt if you couldn't breathe fire, right? So how do we find that? I mean, I think the bias toward action is perhaps the easy part of that, but unleashing your inner fire, talk to me about that.
Yeah, and so let's step back around the swarm, because this is a key part, and I think you would agree with me in your career, in your life, Chicky, that I have some friends that say your vibe attracts your tribe. Well, typically, if your vibe attracts your tribe, you attract yourself to people of the same likeness, the same mindsets, the same goals, right? Well, the whole concept of a swarm, if you read around dragon swarms, is that there's a diverse group of dragons that come together. They look different, they act different, they do things different. As an organization, and in today's time, if you surround yourself with people that look like you, act like you, think like you, what are you going to get? Just another you.
Right.
Definition of insanity, right? That, like, Right. So there's a real concept around swarm that leads to this bias towards action and unleashing that inner fire.
Mhm.
I purposely, Robin and Michael and I are on the extreme spectrum in not only business, but in political, but in personal. I purposely surround myself with people who act and think different than I do.
Mhm.
When I do that, that actually allows me to unleash that inner fire. That allows me to move in and lean. And I've in 2021, I've made this commitment, and it's around really unleashing your inner fire, that I no longer agree to disagree with people. What I agree to do is respect people. um, because I need to hear differing opinions, different sides to make me a better person so I can unleash that fire.
Mhm. Well, I think the interesting thing about your background, well, there are many things that are interesting about it, but I'm going to hone in on the pastor portion of it. My father was a pastor. I grew up going to church, but didn't really have a personal faith until I turned 16. And I had been the ultimate rebel and the ultimate radical that then became radical about my faith, right? So the interesting thing that I am observing about you now is that you have understood. You were in that mode of telling people from the pulpit, right, what you knew to be true. And now it seems like you've moved into a phase where you want to show them and not,
Yep.
right? And that
Absolutely.
there's actually more power in that. And this is the one thing about the church that I've seen, throughout my life, is the thing that people love to do is to point out when Christians don't live their values, right? That's really easy to find because we're all so fallible, right? But in actually becoming the dragon, right, in becoming
Yeah.
that powerful force, it really is showing people and not just telling people what they want to hear.
Yeah. And that's scary. That's scary, right?
Mhm.
And putting it in church today, I just had this conversation a couple weeks ago with our pastor. I fear that the Church of America is going to die
Mhm.
because we have done nothing more than point and tell people what they need to do and not lived it outside of the four walls.
Yes.
And it's not easy. You know, the reason I quit pastoring wasn't because I didn't love pastoring. It was because I worked within a space in the Christian church where if I cussed, well, you can't be a Christian. If you drink, you can't do this. You can't be a pastor. Well, guess what? I say shit. I say damn. Every once in a while, I use the. Um, I like wine. I like to have drinks with friends. Doesn't mean I don't love the God that I serve or
Right.
whoever. But if I live it, I do more. I have had more impact as a marketplace pastor than I ever had, I think, in the church.
Right.
And that
Well,
scares me.
this last year has given us more opportunity. I mean, I'm the same way. Like on the wall behind me is my story, and it begins with the cross, right? And I have been able to have more conversations because people are working from home, and they would have conversations with me now that they wouldn't have had they been in an office, right?
Oh, yeah.
So you bring up after talk about really becoming the dragon, right? Becoming the power that you want to be. You call out something that you call the big three. What is that?
Yeah, and I actually have a T-shirt, and it's not here. This is really hard, especially for business people to take on. So the big three is a rule that we have, and when we're teaching people to disrupt and to think differently, um, we end with this because it's actually a mindset that you have to have. Do no harm. The second one is break rules but not laws. And the third one is proceed until apprehended.
Interesting.
And so far, I've never been apprehended. um, we've worked a lot. I worked a lot of my life in the business world, in healthcare. I'm not going to break laws. I don't want to do things that cause people to die or do something wrong there. But what it's getting at in the big three is get out of the no mindset, right? And my first book I wrote, Chicky, was called The Power of Yes and Innovation. And this summer, we're getting ready to launch the Power of Yes Institute, which is going to be training and development around these mindsets. And we've built curriculum for people that are interested around Kiss Your Dragons as well. But it is this mindset to say, I believe as leaders, particularly C-suite, that our job is to remove barriers and to get shit out of the way so people can do what they're hired to do.
Right.
My job is not to answer 600 emails a day. My job is not to tell you how to do sales. My job is not to tell you how to run the operation. As the CEO of my company, if I don't have people that do that, then they better get their resumes together and go work someplace else, right? My job is to be the visionary and to remove barriers and set direction. Imagine if more C-suites would do that today and get out of the day-to-day and get out of the weed, right? So that's where I say my job is to help to tell people, do no harm, break rules, not laws, and go, run, and proceed until apprehended.
Got it. Got it. Well, I love that. And I think about with what's going on in our country and how people are very, very, no matter what side you're on, right? Very, very frustrated with what's going on at the top level of our country with our federal government. There's this whole movement toward living local, right? We haven't heard that for a long time. We've been so busy living global, right? That we haven't really thought about living local. And, I think it's very interesting, again, to take a look at how you bring the story of the book back to soaring with dragons, right? I mean, the cool thing about dragons wasn't just that they were big and they had fire, right? They could fly. And so how do we soar, right? And again, I think these three rules are a great foundation for being able to do that, because you have to break some rules, right? The normal rules of aerodynamics for this big, enormous creature, right, to take off is just, that's radical all by itself.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what I said something earlier around the statement around I no longer choose to agree to disagree with people, right? But what I've chosen to do and what I choose to do every day is respect people. I can't, and I'm going to put it pretty simple. I grew up in a political family. I was a politician. And I'll admit, I guess my blinders to some things politically over the past years have been because of how I grew up. Because I was taught that no matter if you were Republican, if you were Democrat, if you're a Christian, if you're a Catholic, if you're a Buddhist, whatever it is, right, that you respect people. And it goes back to that 3-point sermon. Be transparent, build relationships, love people.
Right.
What would happen? That to me is soaring. What would happen if we just did that today in our everyday life? How different would our world be?
Right.
I believe, my heart, my gut, and I'm a gut person, I believe we would live in a very different world today.
Well, I absolutely agree with that. And we do have to get back to that place where we do soar. And again, I think that this book has really laid a great foundation. And of course, we can't cover enough of it, in a 30-minute interview.
Yeah.
But what we have been talking about this morning is Kiss Your Dragons, radical relationships, bold heart sets, and changing the world. And our guest this morning has been Shawn Nason. Shawn, if folks would like to learn more about what you're doing in your organization, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Really easy. Shawn Nason, that's with an N, not an M, .com. So www.shawnnason.com leads to my personal page where there's the book stuff. And within there, you can find out about our company, which is Mofi, MOFI.co, not .com, but .co, mofi.co. But if you just go to shawnnason.com, it can direct you to all of that. Would love to have conversations around this. That's what I'm about. Open conversations. Let's be transparent. We talk about it. Let's blow shit up, right? and challenge the status quo. And that's what I'm here to do and want to do.
Well, great. That's the air that I breathe, Shawn. So you're speaking my language.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for listening. Those of you who are listening on demand, we appreciate your support, and please go out and buy Shawn's book. I think you will really love it. I didn't mention, I have just a passion for how books are laid out, and absolutely love the visuals on this book. Again, lots of margin space for those of you who like to write in the margins. And it's just beautiful.
I joke with people, Chicky, and I've got my copy. And those that are watching on demand, you see all of my Post-its. Even I still take notes in my own story and journey, because I'll read something and go, oh, but this applies to today. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Shawn, thank you so much for your time today. And I just hope you have a super weekend.
Thank you.
All right, go out and change your game today and kiss those dragons. Perfect. Thank you so much, Shawn.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap in what you're doing, and certainly what I did during my years of consulting. I only consult on a limited basis now, mostly for friends and clients that are doing something that I think is really fun. But boy, it has to be absolutely outside the status quo, because status quo gives me a stomach ache.
Yeah. Well, let me know if there's anything I can do for you.
Well, I feel quite certain that there is. Nothing ever happens by accident, and
That's right.
So we have crossed each other's paths for a reason. My tech company, what we do is very unusual in the travel industry space. Is we don't sell our product to the travel industry or to travelers. Our primary markets, and one of them is one that you're very familiar with, is in healthcare. When I first designed our product, it was because my niece had a super serious accident, airlifted to a hospital in Billings, Montana. None of us lived there. We all needed to get there, and my sister, since I'm in the travel industry, said, you find a hotel. And so I ended up coming back from that trip. My niece was fine. They were able to save her arm. But when I came home, I said to my husband, I've got to fix this, because this happens every day. People get that phone call if you need to get here, and they have no idea where to stay. And so we built the initial product was the hotels nearby hospitals. And now the product is the hotels nearby golf courses, the hotels nearby zoos, companies, events. And our product is location based. So it's finding the hotel nearby where you're going. And it's also event based. So we know the date that you're traveling, and we plug into CRM, calendaring, contact management, ticketing and registration platforms, so that at the moment you need to travel, it's right there. So
so what's, like, if I were to want to use that, what would I use? Like,
Well, we aren't a consumer product. We're a business to business company. And what we're doing is adding our capability into other platforms where there's already a need to travel. So here's an example. One of our first enterprise clients was in the funeral home space, and they had funeral home technology. And so we were trip enabling the obituary. So if you heard that Uncle Harry died and you say, you know, hey, honey, should we go to the funeral? Should we take the kids? Should it just be us? Right? We're going to see all the cousins, you know, maybe we should all go. Then the next thing you need is a hotel nearby wherever the funeral is being held. Well, that might be at a park. It might be at Aunt Mary's house. It might be at a church. It might be at a funeral home, or they might be, you know, spreading his ashes and you might be going to a beach somewhere, right? So our product, you know, helps with the logistics around that. So the funeral home doesn't have to do it. The family doesn't have to do it. But when somebody views Uncle Harry's obituary, it's just embedded right there. So our goal is to be as many places as possible. So again, your calendaring program, your contact management program, your CRM tool. Imagine if you're coming to see me, you don't have to say, hey, Chickie, where should I stay? Right? You just pull up my record in your CRM platform. You click on the icon for finding the hotel nearby, and it's right there. And it's a feature of your CRM platform.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. So by installing on one CRM platform, we can have 15,000 companies turned on, you know, in less than an hour. And then we, you know, let's say they all have 5 or 10 travelers, multiply, do the math on that. And we don't charge for our product. We revenue share back with our clients. So now the CRM company has a new source of revenue, a higher form of customer service back to the client. Same thing with a hospital. When we are helping nonprofits, you know, which most hospitals are, we actually donate 25% of our revenue to their 501c3.
Wow.
And if the charity helps save teens from human slavery or it benefits veterans, we donate 50% of our revenue.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how old is how old are you guys now?
Well, that's a really tough question to answer. I invented the technology about 9 years ago. I put together a team almost 4 years ago, and we took what I had built, which was a standalone tool. We built a platform. You know, we're now waiting for our patent on that. And we were just about ready to soar right before COVID. So, you know, we've tested our product in a lot of markets, in events and venues and fundraising. But right now the company has been dormant for about a year during COVID because travel and events have not been active. But I believe that's about to change. So I'm building a new team. I'm, you know, raising new capital, and actually I'm creating a new entity called Solutions Impact, because this whole thing of the impact that we make and having that be measurable is really our differentiator in the marketplace.
Well, yeah, let me know. And if there's anything, totally willing. It's funny because one of the things that why our people in our podcast world did not know this, I knew nothing about the network the C-Suite network. So I just joined it.
Oh, interesting.
To get the podcast on there. I will also tell you, and I don't know if you know this, Chickie, the fastest growing market for business podcasts right now are in India.
Really?
And they don't have the typical platforms. So I will real fast here in the chat.
Well, I just invited you to the Game Changer Network, which is my community. So rather than putting it in the chat, accept the invitation to the gamechanger.network and chat with me in there, because my email's out of control and I use my community. That's where I collaborate.
Awesome. I'm going to put 2 things, because I found there are 2 platforms in India that have between the 2 of them have 300 million people on them. and it's easy to submit. So
Got it.
I'll send it to you. So to get your podcast over there. And
Yeah, no, I would love that. That would be terrific. And again, I distribute through technology that allows me to do that onward distribution without having to do it manually. So
yeah,
I'll take a look at what they support.
awesome.
But it was really great to talk to you. And
You too.
you just never know. So what kind of clients do you have right now? You don't have to tell me the names, but what categories do they?
Oh no, I mean we spent the last 2.5 years with Walmart, launching what they call now Walmart Health, their clinics, their disruption to the healthcare industry. We were the strategy group, the innovation group, and the experience group, and then the launch group, implementation group, with them, to make that happen. We've been really in healthcare, and this year we're really trying to push out of healthcare. Not out, but just broaden. So we're helping build the experiential model for Denver Museum of Science and Art.
Well, museums are a perfect client for us. Again, plugging in the tool so people coming to that museum can find a hotel nearby. Because even if they're coming up from Colorado Springs to Denver, they might want to spend the day there or buy a 2-day ticket, in which case they need the hotel nearby. And our product, because the museum is likely a 501c3, right? We would donate 25% of the revenues from anybody who stays nearby. So, and it has driving directions and air if they need it. And we've got a very cool tool it's a concierge capability that they can completely customize that part.
Definitely. Let's talk and let's see what I can do to help.
All right. Cool.
All right. Cool.
All right,
Thanks, Vicki.
Have a great weekend.